I wasn't supposed to be in that stairwell. If I had taken the elevator like a normal person, or left the office 2 minutes earlier or later, none of what I'm about to tell you would have happened. But I did take the stairwell, and I did stop on the landing to tie my shoe. And that is the exact moment my entire professional rivalry turned into something I never saw coming. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 31, a senior strategist at a mid-sized advertising firm in Chicago. And for 14 months, I had been locked in what our coworkers politely called healthy competition and what I privately called a slow-motion war with a woman named Sienna Vance. Sienna and I had been up for the same promotion since the previous spring. Associate Creative Director. 1 seat. 2 names on the shortlist. Her name and mine. Always in that order on the internal memo, which I noticed because apparently even alphabetization can feel like an insult when you're competitive enough. I wasn't always like this. I used to be the kind of guy who let things go, who believed there was enough success in the world for everyone to get a slice. Then Sienna Vance walked into a Monday morning meeting 11 months into my job, presented a campaign concept that made our creative director actually stand up out of his chair, and I understood, somewhere in my chest, that I had just met the one person in this building who could make me feel ordinary. I hated her a little for that. Not personally. Professionally. There's a difference, even if it doesn't always feel like one. She had dark red hair she wore in a low knot most days, sharp hazel eyes that missed nothing in a room, and a habit of tapping her pen against her bottom lip when she was thinking, which I had memorized without meaning to. She was quick, funny in a dry way that caught you off guard, and irritatingly good at her job. We clashed in nearly every meeting. If I pitched a campaign built on nostalgia, she'd counter with something bold and modern that made my idea look tired. If she leaned sentimental, I'd bring data and precision that made her pitch look soft. Our creative director, a woman named Patricia Hale who ran meetings like a woman defusing bombs for a living, started calling us the committee because we never agreed on anything in front of other people. What nobody in that office knew, including me for a long time, was that somewhere between round 400 of our arguments about font weight and round 600 of our arguments about whether a slogan was clever or just cute, I had stopped hating Sienna Vance and started noticing things about her I had no business noticing. The way she rubbed the back of her neck when she was nervous before a big pitch. The way she brought coffee for the interns without being asked and without ever mentioning it to anyone. The way she once stayed 40 minutes after everyone left just to help a junior copywriter fix a broken slide deck, and then acted annoyed when I caught her doing it, like kindness was something she needed to defend herself against being seen doing. I told myself it was respect, professional admiration, the kind of thing colleagues feel for a worthy opponent. I told myself that right up until the night in the stairwell, when I found out I had been lying to myself for months. It started on a Thursday in late October, the week our firm hosted its annual client retreat at a lakeside conference center 2 hours outside the city. 20 of us packed into vans that smelled like rental car cleaner and someone's leftover breakfast burrito, and drove out to a lodge with a view of gray water and a conference room that smelled like fresh carpet glue. The retreat existed, officially, to strengthen client relationships and align creative teams. Unofficially, everyone understood it was also the weekend Patricia would be quietly watching Sienna and me to decide which of us got the promotion. Neither of us said that out loud. We didn't have to. Every panel we co-presented felt like a chess match with an audience. By Thursday evening, after a full day of workshops and a dinner where Sienna outpitched me twice in front of 2 major clients, I needed air. I told myself I was heading down to the lobby vending machine for a coffee I didn't need. Really, I think I just wanted 5 minutes where nobody was measuring me against her. The lodge had an old service stairwell between the 2nd and 3rd floors, the kind with a heavy fire door and a landing wide enough to pause on. I was on that landing, crouched down readying a shoelace that had come undone somewhere between the elevator and my own stubbornness about not using elevators, when I heard the door above me creak open. "I don't even know why I'm telling you this," Sienna's voice said, close enough that I froze mid-knot. "Just don't laugh." Another voice answered, Lighter, faster. I'm not going to laugh. Since when do I laugh at you? I make fun of you. Completely different category. I recognized the second voice a beat later. Priya Anand, an account manager from the New York office who had flown in for the retreat and who I knew was one of Sienna's closest friends outside our department. I should have coughed. I should have stood up and made noise and let them know someone was on the landing below. Every decent instinct I had told me to announce myself immediately. I didn't, and I've spent a long time since then deciding whether that makes me a bad person or just an honest one about how much I wanted to know what came next. Okay, Sienna said, and I heard the particular exhale she did before saying something she'd been holding on to too long. It's about Ethan. My whole body went still in a way that had nothing to do with the shoelace. Oh, here we go, Priya said, and I could hear the grin in her voice even through a stairwell door. The eternal nemesis. What did he do now? Steal your parking spot? Win an argument about kerning again? That's the thing, Sienna said, and her voice had dropped into something quieter, something I had genuinely never heard from her in 14 months of shared conference rooms. He didn't do anything. That's the whole problem. I'm going to need you to use more words than that. There was a pause. I heard footsteps, like she was pacing the small landing above me, and I pressed myself flatter against the wall like that would make me any less present in a stairwell I clearly had no business occupying. I keep waiting for him to actually annoy me, Sienna said finally. Like, structurally annoy me. Not the competition stuff. That's fun. That's a game we're both good at. I mean, I keep looking for a real reason to dislike him, and I can't find one anymore. Priya. He remembers things. Not big things. Stupid things. He remembered I hate mint after I mentioned it once in March, and every time there's a gift basket in a meeting, he quietly moves the mint chocolate to my side of the table like it's contraband and doesn't say anything about it. That's... Priya started. I know, Sienna said before she could finish. And he argues with me like I'm actually smart. Not like I'm a woman he's being careful around. Like I'm dangerous and he respects the danger. Do you understand how rare that is? Most men either flinch or perform. He just gets sharper. It's the single most attractive thing anyone has done to me in 2 years, and it happens in a conference room over a font choice. I stopped breathing, I think. Somewhere above me my heart was doing something violent, and my brain was trying to catch up to what my ears had just delivered. Sienna Vance, Priya said slowly. Are you telling me you like Ethan Cole? There was a long pause. Long enough that I almost gave up and assumed she'd said no. Then, I think I have for a while, Sienna said, and her voice cracked slightly on the word while. Just enough that I heard the effort it took her to say it out loud, even to her best friend. Which is humiliating, because we're up for the same job. Because half this company thinks we hate each other. Because I built an entire persona around being his rival, and it turns out the persona was never entirely fake. It just wasn't telling the whole story. Okay, but does he know? God. No, Sienna said immediately, like the idea alone frightened her. And he can't. If he finds out I've spent months thinking about him instead of just competing with him, he wins. He wins everything. The job, the upper hand, all of it. I refused to hand him that. I sat on that stairwell landing with my shoe still half-tied and felt something in my chest crack open like a window that had been painted shut for years. You could just tell him, Priya said, gentler now. Worst case, he says no, and you've lost nothing you actually had. Worst case, Sienna said, he says no, and I still have to sit across from him in every meeting for the rest of my career pretending my heart didn't just fall out of my chest in front of the one person who could actually use it against me. No, I'd rather lose the promotion than lose my dignity in front of Ethan Cole. Footsteps again, moving toward the door I was hiding beneath. I did the only thing my brain could produce in that half-second of panic. I stood up fast, opened the stairwell door beneath them like I'd just arrived, and started climbing the stairs like a man who had heard absolutely nothing. I met them on the landing between floors. Priya's eyebrows shot up immediately, the universal expression of someone doing rapid mental math about how much I might have overheard. Sienna's face went through 3 visible stages in under 2 seconds. Surprise, alarm, and then a very practiced neutral that I now understood, with brutal new clarity, was armor. "Ethan," she said, her voice perfectly even, perfectly rival-shaped. "Didn't peg you for the stairs, guy." "Cardio," I said, and my own voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. "Beats the elevator small talk." Priya looked between us like she was watching a tennis match she had significant financial interest in. "I'm going to go find that vending machine," she said, entirely too quickly, and disappeared down the stairs, leaving Sienna and me alone on a landing that suddenly felt much smaller than it had 30 seconds earlier. "You look weird," Sienna said, studying me. "Weirder than usual, I mean." "Long day," I said. "Client dinners take something out of a person." She nodded slowly, not quite buying it, but not pushing either. "Well, see you at the 7 a.m. session neither of us wants to attend." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, and she gave me a small, tired smile before continuing up the stairs, and I stood there on that landing for a long time after she was gone, holding a piece of information I had absolutely no right to and absolutely no idea what to do with. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in a lodge bed that smelled like pine air freshener and stared at a ceiling fan that wouldn't stop clicking, and I replayed her voice saying "I think I have" for a while over and over until the words stopped sounding like words and started sounding like a verdict. "Here's what nobody tells you about accidentally learning someone likes you. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like holding something incredibly fragile that you never asked to be handed, and knowing that one wrong move could shatter it before you even got to see what it was." I could tell her I'd heard. I could pretend I hadn't and wait for her to say something on her own terms, which, based on what I'd just heard, might be never. I could do nothing and let the promotion decision happen and let us go back to being rivals who almost meant something and never found out. None of those options felt right. So I did what I always did when a problem got too big for my head alone. I called my sister. Ren Cole picked up on the third ring, sounding like she'd been asleep, which she probably had been, given the time difference between Chicago and her apartment in Denver. "This better be an emergency," she said. "I overheard Sienna Vance tell her friend she's been in love with me for months." I said, no preamble, because Ren didn't do preambles well at midnight. There was a long pause, followed by the sound of my sister sitting up very fast. "The Sienna? Work nemesis Sienna? The one you've complained about for a year, like she personally ruined your childhood? That's the one." "Ethan," Ren said slowly, like she was talking to someone standing near a ledge, "you have been talking about that woman nonstop for 14 months. Do you understand how that sounds from the outside?" "I talk about her because she's infuriating." "You talk about her," Ren said, "the way people talk about someone they can't stop thinking about." "I told Mom in July I thought you had a thing for your work rival, and Mom said," and I quote, "Well, at least he's paying attention to somebody." I sat down on the edge of the lodge bed, the ceiling fan still clicking above me. "That's not. Okay, that's a little accurate. But it doesn't matter. She said herself she doesn't want me to find out. She'd rather lose the promotion than have me know." "Which tells you everything," Ren said, gentler now. "Ethan, people don't protect things that don't matter to them. She's not scared of losing a job opportunity. She's scared of losing to you on the one thing she can't win by being better prepared. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing." I stared at the ceiling. "So what do? You figure out if you feel the same way," Ren said, "and then you stop hiding behind a stairwell and you tell her the truth before this turns into one of those stories people tell for the rest of their lives about the time they almost had something and didn't." I didn't answer right away, because the honest answer had been sitting in my chest for longer than I wanted to admit, and hearing it out loud from Sienna's own mouth had just knocked loose every wall I'd built to avoid looking at it directly. I did feel the same way. I had for a while, too. I just hadn't let myself call it that. The next morning's 7 a.m. session went about as well as any 7 a.m. session filled with people who had barely slept. I sat 2 rows behind Sienna and spent 90 minutes watching the back of her head instead of the slideshow, replaying every interaction from the past 14 months through an entirely new lens. The way she always sat where she could see the door. The way she'd started laughing at my jokes months before she started admitting she found them funny. The mint chocolate thing, she'd noticed. Of course she'd noticed. She noticed everything. That was half of what made her terrifying to compete against. At the lunch break, I found her at the coffee station, stirring cream into a cup she wasn't really drinking, staring out the window at the gray lake. "You survived the 7 a.m., I said. "Barely," she said, not looking at me. "I think Greg from accounts fell asleep with his eyes open during the ROI slide. I've never respected anyone more." I laughed, and she almost smiled, and for a second it felt like every other conversation we'd had for the past year. Except now I knew what was underneath it, and it made every word land differently, heavier, like I was hearing a second conversation happening beneath the first one. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She glanced at me, guarded immediately, the way she always got when a question threatened to move past the safe territory we usually stayed in. "That depends entirely on the question. Do you actually hate me?" I said. "Or is that just the game we play so neither of us has to admit we're good at the same things?" Something flickered across her face, fast, there and gone. "That's a strange question for a Friday. I've had a strange week." She studied me for a long moment, her eyes doing the thing they always did in meetings when she was deciding how much of the truth a room deserved. "I don't hate you, Ethan," she said carefully. "I've never hated you. I just decided a long time ago it was safer to compete with you than to like you. Competing, I know how to survive. The other thing seemed a lot more dangerous." My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the coffee smell around us. "Dangerous how?" "Because you're the kind of person who could actually matter," she said. And then, like she'd surprised herself with the honesty, she looked away fast, back out toward the lake. "Forget I said that. Long week. Bad sleep. Ignore me." I could have let it go. Every safe version of me wanted to let it go, wanted to protect the careful truce we'd built where neither of us said too much out loud. But I'd spent a whole night on a lodge bed deciding I didn't want safe anymore. "I heard you," I said quietly. "Last night. On the stairwell. I wasn't trying to. I was tying my shoe, and then I couldn't figure out how to stop listening." Sienna went very still, the coffee cup halfway to her mouth, frozen there like the words had physically stopped her hand. "What exactly," she said slowly, "did you hear?" "Enough," I said. "That you've been thinking about me for a while. That you'd rather lose the promotion than let me know. That the mint chocolate thing didn't go unnoticed." Her face drained of color, then flushed red almost immediately after. A full physical retreat happening in front of me in under 3 seconds. "Oh my God," she said, setting the cup down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. "Oh my God, Ethan." "Sienna." "No," she said, backing up half a step, her hand coming up like she could physically hold the conversation at bay. "No, this is exactly what I said I didn't want. This is the exact scenario. You weren't supposed to know. This isn't. I need you to forget that. All of it. Every word." "I don't want to forget it," I said. "That's not your choice to make," she said, and her voice cracked slightly, the same crack I'd heard through the stairwell door, except now it was aimed directly at me, and it hurt more than I expected it to. "You get to walk away from this with an advantage you didn't earn, Ethan. You know something about me I never wanted you to have. Do you understand what that does? Every time I lose an argument to you from now on, I'm going to wonder if it's because I'm actually wrong or because some part of me is letting you win. That's not what I want," I said. "It doesn't matter what you want," she said. "It matters what's true. And what's true is you now have something over me that I can never take back." She turned and walked toward the conference room, leaving me standing at the coffee station with a half-formed apology dying in my throat and a growing, sick understanding that I had handled the single, most important conversation of the year like a man who had never once had to be careful with someone else's heart. The rest of the retreat happened around us in a blur I barely remember. Sienna avoided me with the precision of someone who had trained her entire career for exactly this kind of tactical retreat. She sat on the opposite side of every room. She answered my questions in meetings with clipped, professional efficiency and nothing more. Patricia noticed. Of course Patricia noticed. and pulled me aside on the second to last day with the particular expression of a creative director who smelled a problem that might affect a promotion decision. "Whatever's happening between you two," Patricia said, "fix it before Monday. I need my top two candidates functioning like adults, not middle schoolers who broke up over a lunch table." "We're not," I started. "I don't care what you're not," Patricia said. "I care what this looks like in front of clients. Fix it." I spent the 2-hour drive back to Chicago in the van seat directly behind Sienna, watching the back of her head the whole way, trying to find the right sentence, the one that could undo the damage of a truth she never wanted delivered secondhand. I didn't find it in the van. I found it 3 days later, on a Tuesday evening, standing outside her apartment building with a coffee I'd bought and let go cold because I'd been standing there for 20 minutes trying to work up the nerve to buzz her unit. Her building was a converted warehouse near the river, the kind with exposed brick and a buzzer system old enough to be charming instead of broken. I found her name, S. Vance, Unit 4C, and pressed the button before I could talk myself out of it again. "Yes?" Her voice came through tinny and surprised. "It's Ethan," I said. "I know I'm probably the last person you want at your door. I'd like 5 minutes anyway." There was a long pause, long enough that I genuinely thought she might just leave me standing on the sidewalk. Then the buzzer sounded, and the door clicked open, and I climbed 4 flights of stairs that felt considerably longer than they should have. She opened the door in leggings and an oversized sweater, hair down for the first time I could remember seeing it outside of Friday, her expression somewhere between wary and exhausted. "5 minutes," she said, stepping back to let me in. "I'm timing it." Her apartment was smaller than I expected, warm, full of framed photography prints and a bookshelf organized in a way that suggested a system I'd never understand, but that clearly made sense to her. I stood just inside the door, suddenly aware of how much bigger this conversation felt in a private space than it had in a lodge coffee station. "I've had 3 days to figure out what to say," I said. "I still don't think I have it right, but I'd rather say it badly than not say it." She crossed her arms, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Go ahead." "I shouldn't have told you I heard," I said. "Not because it wasn't true. Because I told you like it was information, like a fact I was handing over, when it should have been the start of a conversation instead. I turned something you were scared to say into a weapon by accident, and I'm sorry. That was never what I wanted it to be." Something in her posture loosened, just slightly. "Okay," she said. "Keep going." "The truth is," I said, "I've spent 14 months telling myself I was competing with you because I respected you. And that was real. That part was always real. But somewhere in there it stopped being just respect. I started noticing things I had no business noticing. The way you push your hair back before a big pitch like you're gearing up for battle. The way you're kinder to junior staff than you ever let anyone see. The way arguing with you feels better than agreeing with almost anyone else in that building." Sienna's arms slowly unfolded, her hands dropping to grip the counter edge behind her instead. "Ethan, I heard you say you'd rather lose the promotion than have me know how you feel," I said. "And I've been sitting with that for 3 days, and I need you to know it's the opposite for me. I don't want the promotion if the cost is you thinking I only want you now because I found out you wanted me first. That's not what this is. I think I've wanted this, wanted you, for a lot longer than I let myself admit, and hearing you say it out loud didn't create anything new. It just made me stop lying to myself about something that was already there." The apartment went quiet except for the hum of her refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic 4 floors below. Sienna looked at me for a long moment, her eyes doing that careful, assessing thing they always did, except this time I understood exactly what she was measuring, how much of this was real, and how much she could afford to believe. "You realize," she said finally, her voice unsteady in a way I'd never heard from her, "that if this goes wrong, I have to see you every single day, in every meeting, for the rest of whatever career I have at that company." "I know. That's terrifying," she said. "It terrifies me too," I said. "I've never wanted anything that also came with that much risk attached. Usually I'm smart enough to avoid that combination entirely." A small, involuntary laugh escaped her, quickly suppressed, like she was annoyed at herself for still finding me funny in the middle of something this serious. So what exactly are you asking me? I took a breath, the kind that felt like stepping off a ledge I'd been standing on the edge of for over a year. I'm asking if the rivalry was ever the whole story, or if some of it was always this instead. And I'm asking if you'd let me take you to dinner somewhere that has nothing to do with client budgets or promotion timelines, just to find out what we are when nobody's grading us. Sienna was quiet for long enough that I started preparing myself for the answer I didn't want. Then she pushed off the counter and crossed the small kitchen until she was standing close enough that I could see the exact moment her guard came down, piece by piece, like something she'd been holding up with effort finally allowed to rest. I've spent so much energy, she said quietly, making sure you never saw this version of me. The scared version. I built the entire rivalry so I'd never have to stand in a kitchen looking this unprotected in front of you. I like this version, I said. I like all the versions. I just didn't get to say that until a stairwell forced my hand. Her mouth curved, small and real. That stairwell owes me an apology. I'll write it a strongly worded memo. She laughed again, fuller this time, and something in the room shifted, the tension breaking into something warmer. Dinner, she said slowly, like she was testing how the word felt out loud. No pitch decks. No Patricia watching us like lab specimens. None, I said. Just us. Okay, she said. Yes. Dinner. I felt something in my chest unclench that had been tight since the moment I overheard her voice through that stairwell door. Friday? Friday, she agreed. And then, because she was still Sienna, still sharp even in a moment this soft, she added, but if you're late, I'm ordering the most expensive thing on the menu out of spite. Noted, I said. I'll be early. I was early. Absurdly early, actually. The kind of early that meant I sat in my car outside the restaurant for 12 minutes because I refused to be the guy who showed up before the woman he was trying to impress and looked overly eager doing it. When Sienna walked in, wearing a deep green dress that had nothing to do with client meetings or conference rooms, hair loose around her shoulders, I understood in an entirely new way why 14 months of arguing with her had felt like the most alive I'd been in years. Dinner was nothing like our usual conversations, and also exactly like them, which surprised me. We still argued about restaurants, about a movie neither of us agreed on, about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, a debate she conducted with the same ferocity she brought to campaign pitches. But underneath the argument was something new now, something unguarded that hadn't been allowed to exist in a conference room. Can I ask you something? She said, halfway through dessert, turning her spoon slowly in a shared plate of something chocolate neither of us had needed, but both had wanted anyway. Why didn't you ever say anything? Before the stairwell, I mean. If some part of you felt this way for a while. I thought about it honestly instead of reaching for something easy. Because I convinced myself the rivalry was the safest version of you I was ever going to get, I said. I'd rather have you as a worthy opponent forever than risk telling you the truth and losing even that. At least fighting with you meant I got to keep you close. Her expression softened into something that looked almost like recognition. That's the exact same reason I never said anything, she said. I built an entire persona around not needing you to like me back. Because needing that felt like handing you a weapon. Guess we were both just protecting the same thing from opposite directions. Ridiculous, in hindsight. Extremely, she agreed, and reached across the table to take my hand, like it was the easiest decision she'd made all week, even though I knew, from everything I now understood about her, that it wasn't easy at all. It was brave. That mattered more. Monday came, inevitably, and with it came Patricia's decision on the promotion. We sat in her office together, Sienna and I, side by side in the 2 chairs across from her desk like defendants awaiting a verdict, except now our hands were technically touching in the small space between the armrests where nobody could see. I've been watching you two circle each other for 14 months, Patricia said, folding her hands on the desk. And whatever happened between the retreat and now, you've clearly worked something out. Because you walked in here today looking like a unified front instead of 2 people trying to knife each other creatively. We reached an understanding, Sienna said carefully. Good, Patricia said, because I'm not giving this promotion to either of you. I felt Sienna's hand tense under mine. I'm creating a new role, Patricia continued. Co-creative directors. You two spent over a year producing the two best campaign concepts this firm has seen in 5 years, and you did it by pushing each other harder than anyone else in this building could. I'd be an idiot to split that up just to give one of you a title the other one earned right alongside you. Sienna and I looked at each other, something disbelieving and delighted passing silently between us. We'll fight over everything, I said to Patricia, though I was looking at Sienna when I said it. I'm counting on it, Patricia said dryly. Fighting well is apparently what the two of you do best. Try not to fall in love in the break room. It's bad for productivity. Too late, Sienna said, and Patricia actually laughed, an event so rare that a junior copywriter walking past the glass office door visibly did a double take. The weeks right after Patricia's announcement were stranger than I expected. Sienna and I had spent over a year building an entire language out of competition. Sharp comebacks, one-upmanship, the particular thrill of proving each other wrong in front of a room. Suddenly, we were supposed to build something out of cooperation instead, and neither of us had a manual for that. The first real test came 2 weeks in, during a pitch for a beverage client that wanted a full rebrand. Sienna wanted to lead with an emotional story about family recipes passed down through generations. I wanted to lead with bold, modern visuals that would look sharp on a billboard. Old habits kicked in fast. We were mid-argument in the small conference room, voices climbing, when I caught myself gesturing at her the way I used to when we were still rivals trying to win instead of partners trying to build something together. I stopped mid-sentence. We're doing the thing again. Sienna blinked, arms still crossed, clearly mid-wind up for her next point. What thing? The thing where we forget we're supposed to be on the same side now, I said. I don't actually think you're wrong about the story angle. I think I got scared of losing an argument to you out of habit, so I dug in instead of listening. She was quiet for a second, some of the fight draining out of her shoulders. I did the same thing, she admitted. I heard bold visuals and translated it in my head as Ethan trying to outshine me before I even considered you might just have a good idea. So what do we actually think? I said, if neither of us is trying to win. It turned out, once we stopped performing opposition for its own sake, our ideas fit together better than either version alone. We built the pitch around a family recipe story told through bold, modern visuals, sentiment and sharpness, her instinct and mine, stitched into one concept neither of us could have built solo. The client loved it so much they extended the contract for another year. Patricia told us afterward, dryly, that our rivalry had apparently just been an unnecessarily long audition for a partnership, and that we were welcome for the 14 months of free entertainment we'd provided the rest of the office. It became a pattern after that. Not that we stopped disagreeing. We never stopped disagreeing. That wasn't who either of us was ever going to be, but we learned the difference between fighting to win and fighting to build something better. It turned out to be a much better use of everything that had always crackled between us. Not everyone made the transition as gracefully. A senior account executive named Grant Whitmore, who had made no secret of his own ambitions for the promotion and even less secret of his irritation at being passed over entirely, spent the following weeks needling both of us in meetings, questioning our joint decisions in front of clients, trying to find cracks he could widen. Must be convenient, he said one afternoon in the break room, loud enough for half the floor to hear, getting a promotion because you're sleeping with your competition instead of beating her. The room went quiet. I felt something cold and sharp rise up in me, the kind of anger I usually kept carefully controlled in professional settings. But before I could say anything, Sienna set down her coffee mug with a precision that somehow felt louder than slamming it. Careful, Grant, she said, her voice pleasant in the specific way that meant danger to anyone who knew her. I built my entire career being underestimated by men exactly like you, and it's never once worked out well for the men. Ethan and I earned this by outthinking you in every single client meeting for over a year. If that's hard to accept, I'd suggest examining why watching two people succeed together bothers you more than watching either of us succeed alone. Grant didn't have a response for that. Nobody in the room did. I watched him walk out with his jaw tight, and I felt something settle in my chest that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with pride. The specific, sharp pride of watching someone you love defend herself without needing you to do it for her. "You didn't have to do that," I said quietly once we were alone. "I know," she said. "I wanted to. There's a difference." 6 months later, we sat in the same conference room where we'd spent 14 months arguing about font weights and campaign concepts. Except now the argument was about whose name should go first on the door plaque, a debate that ended, appropriately, in a coin flip she called and won, because of course she did. A year after that, we moved in together, into an apartment with a kitchen big enough for both our chaotic, competing cooking styles and a bookshelf. We spent an entire weekend arguing over how to organize before compromising on a system neither of us fully agreed with, which felt exactly right for us. 2 years after the stairwell, I proposed in that same lodge by the lake, on the same landing where I'd overheard her voice change everything. Down on one knee with a ring I'd been carrying around nervously for 3 weeks. "This is either extremely romantic," Sienna said, laughing through tears, "or deeply strange, considering what happened the last time we were on this exact landing." "I like to think of it as poetic," I said. "This is where I found out the rivalry was never the whole story. Felt right to ask you the rest of it here too." She said yes before I'd even finished the sentence, which she still denies to this day, insisting she let me finish out of politeness, though we both know that's not true. We called Ren from the parking lot before we'd even left the lodge grounds, both of us talking over each other trying to tell the story, and my sister laughed so hard on the other end of the line that she had to hand the phone to her husband to finish the conversation. "I told you," Ren said, once she'd caught her breath. "Back when you called me at midnight panicking about a stairwell. I told you it was the whole thing, not just a small thing." "You did," I admitted. "I hate when you're right." "Get used to it," Ren said. "It's happening for the rest of your life now, apparently, since you're marrying someone who sounds exactly as stubborn as I am." Sienna, listening on speaker, laughed and said, "I already like her more than I like you, Ethan, and I haven't even met her in person yet." Ren declared that an excellent start to the relationship, and the two of them spent the next 20 minutes planning a future alliance against me that, for years later, remains fully operational and remarkably effective. Priya, predictably, took full credit for the entire relationship the moment she heard, insisting that her stairwell conversation with Sienna had been a calculated act of matchmaking rather than an accident I'd stumbled into by tying my shoe at the wrong moment. "I knew you'd be listening," she told me at the wedding, entirely unconvincingly, holding a glass of champagne like a woman rewriting history in real time. I raised my voice on purpose. Sienna, standing beside her in a white dress that made the whole reception hall go quiet when she walked in, just shook her head and said, "She absolutely did not, but let her have this." These days, when people at the firm ask how we ended up together, Sienna usually says, "He eavesdropped on a private conversation and completely ruined my carefully constructed emotional defenses." And I usually add, "She was building a fortress. Somebody had to point out the door." Both are true. Neither is the whole truth. The whole truth is that sometimes the person you've spent months treating like an opponent was never really the opponent at all. She was just the one person brave enough and scared enough to hide how much she actually cared, right up until the moment a stairwell gave her away. So tell me, what would you have done if you overheard your rival confessing she actually liked you, and you had to decide whether to pretend you never heard a word? And have you ever found out someone's competitive front was hiding something completely different underneath? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.